Or I'll do it like a radio show. So now we're live.
Okay.
It's 11:59 at Radio Free America. This is Uncle Sam with music and the truth until dawn. Right now, I got a few words for some of our brothers and sisters in the occupied zone. The chair is against the wall. The chair is against the wall. John has a long mustache. John has a long mustache. It's 12 o'clock, Americans, another day closer to victory. And for all of you out there on or behind the lines, this is your song.
So as people show up, we'll see their comments over there. Welcome, everybody, to another edition of our Minuteman University interviews. We're going to be talking to Charles Heller, a friend of ours from Tucson, Arizona. We are doing a series of interviews with Second Amendment advocates, people that are interested in Second Amendment rights. We do this a la some of our favorite podcasts out there, and actually part of this is structured off of Charles's radio show. But for the most part, I structure this show very much like the James Kalita Out of Order podcast from New Jersey, or the Riding Shotgun with Charlie, or the Gun Freedom Radio from Arizona. All three of those have focus on Second Amendment advocates. My only complaint with any of them is that they don't let the advocates talk long enough. So I'm about to shut up here. We're going to spend an hour with Charles Heller. We're predominantly going to talk about what he does and what he's done. We're going to talk about why he does that and how he does it. Charles, it's been a pleasure knowing you for a long time. You're an inspiration to what I do.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us tonight. Tell us a little bit about what you do.
As far as the Arizona Citizens Defense League is concerned?
As far as Charles Heller, I know you've got a lot of oars in the water. You've been doing this for a long time. Our goal here is to let people know a little bit of insight about Second Amendment advocates. So often you guys are just guests on shows, or maybe part of a panel. You get a moment to talk about what you're doing. Right. So take 20 minutes. Tell us about what all you've done or what you're doing. And
well, I started out as a child in Chicago.
I started out that way too.
In Chicago. And I got interested in, I guess it's just sort of natural. You know, you grow up, I'm 62 years old, so you grow up watching the Riflemen, and you watch, the Wild Wild West and programs like that, just in Roy Rogers. You just naturally get interested in firearms. My dad was a firearms instructor in World War II. He was a gunnery instructor in tanks at both Fort Campbell and later at Fort Knox. And so, in fact, when we went to Fort Knox to visit the museum, he says, this building feels oddly familiar. And then we saw there was like a pit on one end, and that was the firing trench. And it turns out that was a rifle range, an indoor rifle range. And he goes, I know what this place is. And he was just like a kid going, wow, I used to instruct from right over there, and these were where the guys were shooting, and this is where the backstops were. And he was like a little kid in his environment. And I guess some of that enthusiasm just transferred into me. Also, when I was a child, he read to me but never from children's books. He read to me from Admiral Ellsberg's On the Bottom, about the salvage of the submarine S-51, which had been rammed and sunk in 1926 by a freighter called the City of Rome and the barge it was towing. And he just infected me with this curiosity about things military and ballistic and nautical. And so I pursued that throughout my life. I've done things. I've developed hobbies that sort of are parallel to or concomitant with the things that I love to do and love to learn about. And I got more and more and more into the firearm topic, first by just reading magazines, and then by reading books, and then by reading about rights, books by like Don Young and many of the classic firearm books, That Every Man Be Armed by the lawyer Stephen Holbrook, and books like that, where I kind of got my grounding. And then over a period of time, the internet became a thing, and I started communicating with other people who were right to keep and bear arms oriented. And I got involved with Grassroots when it was a thing here in Arizona. Grassroots was a Second Amendment group.
So not grassroots, but brass,
right?
Play on words.
Grassroots, right? Exactly. Which was a grassroots organ, or a grassroots with brass type organization. And Grassroots kind of got on the radar and got noticed by the Second Amendment Foundation, won an Organization of the Year award at one point in the 80s. And then Grassroots kind of fizzled, lack of enthusiasm. The people who were running it kind of came to loggerheads with other people who were running it. And long and short of the story is that grassroots kind of faded. So over a period of time, there was in Arizona, we had this, Arizona being a very gun-friendly state, but we had no real gun lobby in Arizona. Yeah, we had the Arizona State Rifle and Pistol Association, but they weren't real activists in their organization. If a bill came to, not many bills came to the legislature, really, in Arizona that were anti-gun. Really, in 1968 was the first truly anti-gun bill we had, and it was put through by Sandra Day when she was in the Arizona legislature, who later became Sandra Day O'Connor, and also Ben Avery.
Oh, really?
After whom the range is named, as in Phoenix. And it was Ben Avery's crafting of the bill that Ann Day ran that gave us our first concealed weapons law in 1968. When a whole rash of anti-freedom bills went through both the federal and state legislatures. And it's when organizations like Handgun Control first started getting going and things like that. And then, so we had no, in Arizona, this was in 2000, we had no really organization going. And at some point, I was involved in either a chat room or just emails back and forth with several other activists. Among them was Dave Kopp and John Wentling and Fred Dank and a few other people. Well, now you get friendly, doggy. So anyway, we're sitting here petting a dog, but Pete's dog. But which I got to tell you is a wonderful distraction when you're on the radio, or making a online recording like this. Anyway, I got into various chats with these people, and sooner or later, somehow, we had made a decision to all get together and find a central meeting spot that was south of Phoenix, but way north of Tucson. And we ended up meeting at the Five and Diner on Ray Road in Chandler, and we hammered out an agreement. There were originally 8 people that wanted to be part of this, and it whittled down to 4: Dave Kopp, Fred Dank, John Wentling, and myself, Charles Heller. And we pooled our skills. And Dave was a lobbyist with a modified motorcycle association, and Fred was a retired government executive who had tremendous experience in organizational structure. And John was just a general activist, lobbyist, and pain in the ass. And I had media experience. I had my talk show at that point. I had Liberty Watch and America Armed and Free in 2005. I'd been on the air for 3 years with those. And I'd been on the air for, 1999 to 2005, 6 years with my program called Swap Shop, which is, I suppose I should have talked about in the evolution of things. I'll go back to that in a little while. But we pooled our resources. We each threw in $300, and that was the $1,200 we had to start Arizona Citizens Defense League. And we started doing activism. I used my internal contacts with, I used to own, and I still do own, an advertising specialty company called Success Promotions. So I ordered everything at wholesale, and I didn't mark it up to the organization. And originally, I funded our banners and our bumper stickers and a few other odds and ends. And those are the things we had, so that when we started going to gun shows and we started setting up getting a table at gun shows, we would, we paid full price.
We had a presence. Yeah,
we had
just
presence
guys at a table.
But when people looked at us, we had collateral materials, we had business cards with our logo.
That's what I mean. You were there.
We had something. We had shirts with our logo. I had a name tag with the shape of Arizona with our logo on it, and we appeared to be substantial. And at the end, we would soon become substantial. What happened is that we formed in 2005. In 2006, we got our first piece of legislation that we'd asked for through the state legislature and signed by the governor, and that was called the burden of proof, or the presumption of reasonableness. And the presumption of reasonableness meant that, going back in history, in 1996, there had been a couple murders in Phoenix, and the prosecutorial lobby went literally at 11:30 one night to the legislature and said, "Here's a bill we want you to run." And what it did was it eliminated the what's called the affirmative defenses in Arizona. And from 1996 until 2006, you had no presumption of reasonableness. What presumption of reasonableness means is that when let's say someone assaults you, watch out, there's music in that comes up and plays. If you have to use force in self-defense one way or another, and you call the police. You don't run away, which was, a tremendous indicator of guilt. You call the police. You become the complainant, and you say, "This guy jumped. I was out walking my dog. This guy jumped out of the bushes, pointed a huge Bowie knife at my throat, and said, 'Give me your wallet.' And I knew if I didn't act in that instant, I would be dead or horribly maimed. So I shot him." Well, if that's what you said to the cops between 1996 and 2006, the next 4 words you heard were, "You are under arrest." And the reason was there was no presumption of reasonableness in the law. So what we did in 2006 is we got a bill together that said that if the reason that you use force is covered by ARS 13404, which is physical force and self-defense, ARS 13405, which is deadly force and self-defense, ARS 13406, which is defense of a third person in self-defense, ARS 13407, which is defense of premises, in other words, real estate, and ARS 13408, defense of private property, of personal property, or ARS 13-421, which is defense of display, which means if someone scares you badly and you put your hand on your gun, if that's the reason that you used any level of force, be it a threat, a verbal threat, a physical threat, or you engaged and used deadly force, that you're entitled to the presumption of innocence, provided that you tell the police that you're the victim. And so we got that bill passed. And actually, one of the things that happened, one of the people who voted for it, surprisingly, when she was in the Arizona legislature, was Arizona State Senator Kirsten Sinema, or as she calls herself today, the senator from Meth Lab, Arizona. That's how she referred to herself. She said, "My state is the meth lab of democracy." And so I'm quoting her when I say, the senator from Meth Lab, Arizona. I'm using her words. I'm not just making something up.
Yeah.
But anyway, Kirsten Sinema actually voted with us when we had the burden of the presumption of reasonableness, and the reason is because she's a defense attorney. And it was good for her clients that she was trying to defend, that they have the presumption of reasonableness if they used any level of force, from a verbal threat up to and including deadly force, that they have the presumption of reasonableness when the police arrive. So that was our first bill that we got done at the Citizens Defense League. And then from there, we've done many, many, many other bills. Our crowning achievement was in 2010 when we got the constitutional carry. And what that means is you no longer need a permit in Arizona to put a gun in your pocket or under your shirt or wherever it is you have it, because where you put your gun is a matter of a clothing choice. It's a constitutional right. It's an individual enumerated right, both in the state constitution and the federal constitution. You shouldn't have to beg for a permit. Now, we left the permit in place as an option so that you can have reciprocity with other states and make it easier to buy a gun. But constitutional carry was really our centerpiece of what we've done in our existence, although we have many, many miles to travel before we sleep. But still, those are the things we've done in terms of activism. In terms of me personally, I got into talk radio in 1999. I restarted a program that had been on another radio station called the Swap Shop. And too long a story to get into in only an hour, but suffice it to say that getting into talk radio was the result of an argument with the general manager and program director of a radio station, which shall go unnamed. It no longer exists. And over a period of time, they changed management, and we came to loggerheads, and they threw me out live on air in 2004, and I went to another radio station, the station I'm on now, KVOI. But I'd expanded the program in 2002. I added on another hour, and then I took an option on another hour after that. And eventually it came to where I had 4 hours of radio, 2 hours of the Swap Shop. And the Swap Shop's pretty interesting. It is the unregulated free market governed only by common courtesy and common sense. And people are free to buy, sell, or trade anything they want as long as it's lawful and moral. By lawful and moral, I mean, if you have your machine gun and you want to sell it, as long as it's on a Form 4, and gun people should know what that means. It means it's owned legally. But if it's on a Form 4 and you want to sell it on the Swap Shop, great, fine with me. But no pornography, because one has social value and the other doesn't. And then the reason I started Swap Shop, I like the format. I first heard it in 1972 on a radio station in Interlochen, Michigan, done by a man by the name of John DeRemus, who had the most beautiful voice I've ever heard. And anyway, I started Swap Shop because I wanted to get into radio and I knew I could do it. And then I expanded to Liberty Watch, and then the second hour of Liberty Watch, which is called America Armed and Free, in 2002. And then I brought that 4-hour block of programming from the station I was on over to the station I'm on now. And I've continued on, and I've been on that station for 16 years. And I'm just about to celebrate my 20th anniversary of Swap Shop and my 17th anniversary of Liberty Watch and America Armed and Free. So that's kind of my platform. And then in order to afford my addiction to radio, I sell it during the week. And that's kind of my thing, but also helping other people get going with stuff. Things like, being cooperative with people like yourself, who really are a great, you're a great fulcrum for the Right to Keep and Bear Arms. I really appreciate the fact that you enable people to do things like this program.
Yeah, that's easy.
Did that answer your question? Did that answer your question?
Yeah, but that's not everything. So
it isn't.
No, because there's at least JPFO.
Well, yeah. What happened along the way is that JPFO was founded in 1989 by Aaron Zellman of blessed memory. Aaron passed away in 2010, and the board of JPFO came to me, and after having seen what I'd done in terms of Arizona Citizens Defense League, and I got noticed both nationally and internationally in the wake of the terrible shooting of Gabrielle Giffords and the murder of 6 people along with her, and I got noticed by JPFO. They asked me to replace Aaron as the executive director. I did that for about 2.5 years. I could not do exactly what they wanted me to do, and so parted company with them in more or less friendly terms. And I still continued to do. It's kind of funny, after they fired me, and after I said I don't want to do this and they fired me, it was mutual, but we'll say they fired me, and because it's true. And then I turned around the week after and I volunteered to do the same job I'd been doing with the media for JPFO for free, and they'd paid me a small salary. And the Rabbi Ben-Dori, called me up and said, "Charles, why are you doing this?" And I said, "Rabbi, thank you for asking. It's never been about the money. I've always been with JPFO because of principle. And the principle of JPFO is no compromise. It's just gun control is poison. It's that simple. And gun control is evil. And you should, and it's racist." And
I'm pointing at Tony Simon's shirt.
Pointing at Tony Simon's shirt, which says gun control equals racism, which is a true statement. And Aaron was no compromise. He disagreed with NRA in some ways. I understand what NRA is, an important national tool, and we use them as a blockading force, and we get along with them well at Arizona Citizens Defense League. But anyway, the long and short of the story is that I was asked to be the executive director of JPFO. I wanted to convert it to more of a membership-based organization than a donor-based organization. They didn't see it that way. They didn't hear me, and they ended up running up against the wall, and then in order to survive, having to come under the wing of the Second Amendment Foundation. And God bless Alan Gottlieb for saving the organization and frankly resurrecting it and pumping air and some money into it. And now it's back in the black, and has been for a long time, since Alan's been more or less at the helm. Although Corwin does a lot with it, and Corwin acts kind of like a rudder and steers the organization in good ways. And there's some other people, Tristan Manos, some other people on the board of JPFO, and they do a lot of good. Did you have any questions? Is anyone kicking in wanted to ask me anything? I'm open to questions. I'm a pretty open book. So if you want to, ask me anything, I'm happy to hear it, either out loud if people can hear it, or type questions in the margin there. If you want to ask me anything, I'm glad to do that.
Right on. So that's what so this is a little bit different because I'm actually at Charles's place and we're sitting in front of the same microphone together. So we're looking at the same screen, and
yeah, but you can see it and I can't.
Yeah, exactly. As I say, I'm sitting a bit closer to it, and I know what I'm looking for in the comments.
And I don't have my glasses on, so
But we do these interviews on our largest soapbox, which right now is the Gun Website's YouTube channel. So the people that are watching now or in the future are welcome to comment there. And then, of course, we have the everything we do simulcast on gunchannels.com, the community that we built going on 6 years ago now, a place for conversations like this. It's ours and not under the, just on some other social media platform. So,
and not under the thumb of YouTube.
yeah, exactly. So we do use their tool, but we're not only using the tool. So yeah, we do have some questions coming in, but I've been making, I think Charles noticed I've been taking some notes along the way. So anybody that has any specific questions for some of the what Charles has done, and I still think we haven't reached it all. You're a CCW instructor, and you've been a CCW instructor
26 years.
Yeah, at a level, well, 26 years. I was going to say at a level that is at the competency level, I'm going to suggest, where for a long time with my experience here in Arizona with CCW instructors, there was a majority of them at the qualification level, I would call it, like, here's what you need to do to qualify and here's what I'm going to do.
Right.
And Charles went beyond that. Ever since the 16-hour classes, you went beyond that to give your students some insight to your experiences with Masada Yub and other instruction. Right. And you've given them that extra. And then I've seen instructors who were rebelling against the 16 and the 8-hour instructions during the years and would actually do just really piss poor, I'm going to say, bad CCW instruction. So Charles has been a CCW instructor for not only 26 years, but at a level that I value going to CCW classes. And one of those reasons is because of instructors like Charles, who brings a different, more than just a different curriculum, but a different level of awareness and insight to the class, which then allows the class to actually ask questions that are insightful instead of just sitting there with a bunch of drones.
Well, thank you. One of the things that I do is I try to teach contextually. I try to give people a framework as to how, not just what to listen to, but how to listen and how to interpret what it is I'm saying. Because if you talk at people, it's going to bounce off of them. If you talk to them and try and figure out what it is that they're trying to find, it's like today at work, there's a new salesperson, and she had a problem with her RFID key not being able to start her car, and she had to get a new key made, a new chip made. And she says, I don't understand that. It's a relatively new car. And she said, I said, where do you keep your key? She says, in my purse. And I said, by any chance, do you have a relatively large Bluetooth speaker in your purse? She said, yes. I said, take your keys out of your purse or take your Bluetooth speaker out of your purse or you're going to lose your key again. And she said, how did you know that? How could you be so, how could you figure that out? And I said, well, I've seen it happen before. And so the way I teach is I try, and it freaked out the other people in the room that happened. Okay. And so it's not like I'm some soothsayer or some, mind reader or somebody that's, that's got some kind of show on an occult channel. It's that what I do is I try to be a sponge to learn everything I can, and then to take the experience of the known and compare it to the unknown, and say, mouse, 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 elephant. Where is the difference? And try and I try to inject some amount, although I've done no wisecracking tonight, I try to inject some level of humor into it so that A, it's not boring, and B, it transfers its meaning, and C, it is contextual. Have you ever met somebody or had somebody send you a text that says, are you watching the game? It's like, what friggin' game are you talking about?
Or did you just see that? Yeah.
Did you just see that? It's like, see what? And then they respond, you idiot. It's like, because you weren't thinking the same thing I was thinking. And it's like, and I have people that constantly do this and they don't get over it. It's like, how do you communicate contextually to somebody to sort of give them a framework? And I explain to them, you may be here to get a CCW permit. I'm here to insulate you from the true danger in your life. And the true danger in your life, assuming you're not a criminal and assuming you don't have associations with criminals or terribly, terribly bad habits like doing drugs or selling drugs or being drunk and driving drunk, assuming you don't have, or hanging with people or riding with people who drive drunk, assuming you don't have any really bad habits, the danger to you is not the criminal, because as long as you walk around with your heads up and your eyes open, I call that being UEO. As long as you walk around that in that way, then you know, and you don't have your nose so far into your iPhone that you need the new case they sell with a nose bulge in the back of the phone. Okay, as long as you're not walking around like that, your true danger is not so much the criminal, because the criminal's pretty easy to make go away. All you have to do is make it harder for the criminal to prey on you than on the next guy, and the criminal will go away. But the criminal prosecutor has kind of a perverse incentive that the better you are in the community, the more upstanding you are, the more assets you have. If you, let's say you're defending yourself and you do somewhere from A to Z, you're defending yourself, but somewhere between P and Z, you were doing everything right up to that point, but at point P, you make a mistake. You threaten somebody when you don't have the authority to, or you actually point the gun at them when you don't have the legal justification to do it, and you get indicted and prosecuted for it. Okay, well, the prosecutor, assuming all you did was make a mistake and you didn't do any real harm, you committed a crime, but it was accidental, the prosecutor's actually got more incentive to go after you than the bad guy. And the bad guy doesn't really care if he gets convicted. He's got nothing to lose if he gets convicted, because he's probably been in jail already. He doesn't fear it, and he doesn't have that great a life. You, on the other hand, might have a good job, a house, a family, and a security clearance. All of which
you're not putting a value judgment. You're looking at it from the perspective of the prosecuting attorney.
right.
That's how they.
That's how they work. That's how they work. Okay, and so they're going to lean on you to take a plea bargain. And if you don't, and you plead not guilty, and you go to trial and you lose, you're still going to do some serious time. Your wife will probably divorce you. You're going to lose your house. You're certainly going to lose your security clearance. They're not going to hold your job for however many years you're in prison. I mean, there's a lot of things that are negative, what we call non-positive consequences. All right. So I'm here to teach you how to stay out of that circumstance. And the best way I can teach you that is stay the hell out of the system. And what I teach in the class is how to de-escalate, how not to get into an argument at the side of the road with a cop, how not to show any signs of aggression when you're dealing with people in authority, your posture, your body language, your language, your approach, about knowing your approach speech to people in authority. These are all things I teach, so that my purpose in teaching a class is to de-escalate and to not have, or if there is force used when the police show up, it's clear to them that you're the victim. And I teach a set of protocols so that happens. And I'm not going to do that on this podcast because I don't want to give away.
Well, the idea is to give insight to the depth of your curriculum, or whatever you want to call, like what you delve into.
Right.
And I like to throw out there, because I'll end the show with a.
Is it that time already?
No. I'm just saying, when the show ends, I usually end with an encouragement for people. You know what ends the show. With an encouragement for people to take a CCW class as often as you can. And if you have experienced a concealed carry class and it didn't get into the kind of things Charles just talked about, consider reaching out to instructors in your area and ask them if you can audit their class. And that means sit in on their class and experience the classroom and be part of the classroom, but not take any burden as far as the testing or the range time from them. And oftentimes you can do that for free. And to get the kind of insight Charles just talked about is the reason I suggest that. You'll find all kinds of interesting stuff with different instructors.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so like I say, there are some questions coming in. I just asked them. Feel free to throw your questions in, Charles. I made it bigger so Charles can read this, but I'm going to Ben Avery and Sandra O'Connor before she was, Sandra Day before she was Sandra O'Connor. First off, from what I heard of Sandra Day, she was like from out East Arizona, and she was like a ranch daughter. She's pretty cool up until some point, right?
Right. Well, I mean, there's lots of cool people that have done lots of things that aren't great for our rights. I mean,
so we're not saying anything. She's an inspirational lady. She started from a ranch, and she's a Supreme Court justice. But you're saying back in '68, her and this guy Ben Avery, who I only know about from the range, one of the largest ranges on the planet, but definitely largest range in Arizona, named after him. That was '68. So in other words, to lay it out for people, because a lot of do not have whatever that's called, where the cities get to keep laws.
We have preemption.
We do have state preemption.
We do now, and we did starting in about in the 70s. We had state preemption, but it was lax and it wasn't enforced.
Okay.
And disobedient cities like Tucson said, "Well, we're a charter city, so that doesn't apply to us," which is just,
in other words, we're a city before there was a state, so we can do what we want.
Tucson was chartered, our most recent charter. If you look at the city charter in 1954, it's in order for a city to be chartered, it has to be co-signed. The charter has to be co-signed by the governor of the state. And the 1954 charter is, we have a city councilman here whose name doesn't deserve to even be mentioned, but he said in a live interview on the radio station I'm on, not on my program, he said, "Well, Tucson is not a creature of the state of Arizona." Well, you know, the good councilman in Ward 6 in Tucson really ought to read the city charter. Yes, the heck it is. And you know, where do you think the charter comes from? The charter comes from the state of Arizona, sir.
Yeah.
And I mean, people like that are not only ignorant, but they're full-time four-wheel drive ignorant. I mean, I don't know if you have to take training to get that stupid, or it just comes naturally. But I mean,
well, they're encouraged and they reap the benefits of ignorance. But that's another discussion. So to set the stage, though, Arizona, born in 1912, one of the last, actually the last of the contiguous states, right?
Contiguous,
so we were a territory. We became a state. It wasn't until '68 when, like you say, because of national political pressure, a lot of states started doing things along with the 1968 Gun Control Act. So then we get constitutional prohibition.
Which was signed by a Republican.
Well, so that's when we get CCW prohibitions, and then it wasn't until until we followed the
94
until we followed Florida.
Well, yeah, right. When we followed Florida and got the concealed weapons permit, and a lot of the purists.
So that was 1994. I'm just trying to set the stage for when you guys got together. Not even 10 years later, in 2002.
Well, no,
4.
Well, we got together in 2005.
Okay, 2005. So
barely 11
years after we had CCW back, and in that time, our CCW goes from 16 hours to 8 hours.
Right. Well, that was us.
Exactly.
Right. What happened was that was after we formed, and that was we got CCW was originally a 16-hour class. We got it chopped down to 8, and I think 2007 or 2008 we got it chopped down, and then we got the renewal class chopped down to 4 hours, then 2 hours, and then eliminated. Right. Exactly. And those are all things. Those are a few of the 61 bills we've had signed by 3 governors over 14. 2005 to 15 is 10, and 14 years over the last 14 years.
So that talks a bit about, like I say, the how the Arizona went, and we're not flapping in the breeze. We're not drifting in the current. This isn't the result of what's the word?
Unintended consequence.
No, not unintended even, but
an intended consequence.
Inevitable consequences was the word I was looking for. But like you just said, this was a deliberate act of 4 people that sat down to affect change. And once that gained momentum, you deliberately efforted towards these things incrementally. And we've gotten to where we are today. And that's the reason we're interviewing Charles, because this is the effort of 4 individuals, at least some of the achievements we're talking about here in Arizona of the Arizona Citizens Defense League, the effort of 4 individuals that are doing this in addition to your 9-to-5s. And using a collaboration of skill sets, and with the basically with a good goal and a good plan to get there, and then with the accumulation of the effort of good people in the state. And you did that back then because you didn't really have internet available to you as an option, although you probably would have used it if you had. But you did what you had available: internet, mailings, and going to actual events, and word of mouth, and then the brochures and the bumper stickers, which I got to give you credit. Almost everybody who sees the bumper stickers, you guys have, I would say, at the level of JPFO as far as easy to read and insightful, witty, without being like
harsh,
abusive at all. They're clever, and they're a little bit humorous perhaps, and then insightful to make people go, oh, that's about guns.
That's I do most of the bumper stickers for.
That's why I said it.
Yeah,
But I think that was an element of Arizona Citizens Defense League's success, because there have been other efforts.
Right.
So.
Well, JPFO's bumper stickers in the last 6 or 7 years were mine too. They still have some of them. Gun control is racist, and no more Nazi gun laws that had a swastika with a slash through it. And some people, when they first looked at it, thought that it was pro-Nazi, and then they realized it was anti. So, but it's fine. One of the things that one of the principles we have in the Arizona Citizens Defense League is never compromise principle. You can compromise practice, but you can't compromise principle. So, for instance, one of the things when we got constitutional carry was that if police ask you if you're armed, you have to tell them. You can't simply stand mute. Well, there's a bunch of Supreme Court decisions that say if a cop asks you if you got a gun, you got to tell them, because a gun might be a danger to the police in the performance of their duty, at least according to the police. Okay? In my clothing, it's not a danger to them, but they don't know that when they stop me. So they have the authority, not the right, but the authority to hold a gun during a traffic stop. They have the authority to ask you if you're armed. Well, what we said was in the legislation that got constitutional carry, if the police asks you, you must tell them upon request if you're armed. Now, some states like Ohio and several other states around Texas, Arkansas, or what we call positive declaration states, where as soon as they stop you for a professional reason, you have to tell them that you're carrying. You have to declare, right? And you got to be smart about the way you declare. You don't say to them, "I have a gun." Okay, you want to make a soft declaration. Just so you know, officer, I have a permit and I am carrying. And then you can proceed from there. Is there anything special you'd like me to do? And if you handle it that way, with your hands in a non-aggressive manner, like folded in front of you, your fingers interlaced, just casually against your stomach, then the police officer can see that you're not a threat to them. And the things like that, those are things we put in our bill because they weren't really giving anything up. Now the purists said, "Oh no, you're giving up your constitutional right to remain silent." Well, guys, the Supreme Court already blew that out of the water years ago, and we weren't really giving a darn thing up. Now there's people that are hard activists that say, "Oh no, you don't give them an inch." Well, that ain't giving them anything. Number one, so we didn't compromise on any principle. But those are things that we'll do that will have some bend and flex on to get a really good bill passed. But generally speaking, our idea is, you can do the right thing now or you can do the right thing later. And if you don't want to sign our bill, don't worry, the next governor will. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what we've done. And thank God.
I never thought about as you've now been established for 14 years, you have outlasted pretty much all the
3 governors.
Yeah, everybody elected.
Right. And so, Napolitano, who was the governor when we started, hated us, and we still got stuff done. Brewer liked us in the beginning and then kind of went neutral, wouldn't give us anything. Basically the stupid red flag bill idea, which is going exactly nowhere. It's getting as much traction as a one-wheel drive vehicle in a mud rut, and that's with the Republicans. And the Democrats, it's not getting traction with them because they say, "Oh no, that's not harsh enough."
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
So he's getting nowhere near a majority of either Republicans or Democrats that will go with it. That's fine with us. As far as we're concerned, he can stay stuck in that same rut and spin his wheels all he wants. In fact, if he wants to get out of the vehicle and have somebody step on the gas while he stands behind the wheel and gets splattered with mud, fine with us. So, it's his rut. It's his rut. That he created. Microphone, you think?
Nah, I think it's probably this.
Your connection?
Working. No, it's just this machine is not the best machine, so it might be glitching.
Oh, well,
windows open.
If you close a couple.
No, they're saying it's roboting, so it's not so much a volume. It's a more of a connection thing. Oh. But most of the time, well, number one, I don't even have my thing up all the way, so I'll change that. But that might solve it right there. But otherwise, if you pause every once in a while, that's all it takes to buffer, basically.
Oh,
So I
I
think what's neat about
can talk more pausingly
No.
if you like.
just multiple sentences, put a period every once in a while, and
Oh.
then just so that the thing can buffer is all.
Oh. Don't be such a talk show host, in other words.
It's just a different bandwidth that you guys
Oh,
have on the show. As far as it's a CCW or the constitutional carry went, what I think is neat about that, a lot of people, I think, again, don't realize that CCW or CCW, what you guys accomplished with constitutional carry here in Arizona was basically took an eraser to the state law. It
Right.
wasn't adding something to
Right.
state law. It was simply going into the existing state law, and I'm sure Charles can tell us it's ARS statute, whatever.
133102.
And then basically saying there was a couple of clauses that would say, unless you have a CCW permit, and you were able to basically just go in and erase the part that added that caveat.
Right.
And that, in effect, allowed the CCW permit to stay in effect, like you
Right.
said, for all the reciprocity and issues people might have with 4473s or whatever. But then gave us constitutional carry, which is then now being
Right.
used in what, 16 states? As
Right.
one of the architects for 16 states.
And the other thing is, it did add some provisions to ARS 133112, which is the concealed weapons permit statute in Arizona. It added a few pieces there, here and there, and it made a few other changes in state law. But the other thing it did was it sawed the legs out from under DPS's stool about making all kinds of arcane regulations on the CCW class. It basically said any certified NRA instructor can teach a class, and that class will be what's good enough for a concealed weapons permit, plus the addition of Arizona law. My class goes well beyond that in terms of not only law, but also practical things about self-defense.
So just to play host a little bit, I adjusted one of my little knobs in here. Did that make any change to our audio? And then I'll start asking questions that have come in from the people on there listening, because we're getting towards the end here. I think we started a little bit late, so I'm going to ask you the big question, why, here in a second, and I leave that pretty much open so that we get to listen to people's reasoning, the motivation, why you do what you do. But first I wanted to say, Dano, guy from Illinois, he's outside of Rockford.
Oh,
Charles knows Illinois.
Route 51.
You know where Black Hawk is? Black Hawk statue on the river. Big giant picture.
Oh yeah, you mean is that up by Starved Rock?
Yep.
Yes, I've been there.
Yep. So that's where Dano's at.
Okay.
That area. To Charles, what does racism equals gun control mean to you?
Well, gun control got its start in the United States in the Jim Crow laws. That's where we first saw the first gun control laws in the United States, and it was basically a way to keep the black man from having some way of defending himself against lynchings and other violence. And it spread. And I saw a T-shirt one time that saw two people in handcuffs, and one guy was black and one guy was white. And the black guy was saying to the white guy, "Well, I guess gun control is no longer just for black folks." And so, and that's what's happened. It kind of metastasized into the community, and hoplophobes, people who have an irrational fear of guns, have made their way into legislatures and tried to demonize the tool of self-defense until it was as if it were evil, when it's the act of the person that's either good or evil, not the act of the tool they're using. But everybody listening probably knew that.
So if anybody's got any other questions, I'm going to ask Charles the big one. Why do you do what you do? I mean, this isn't, and we're not sitting here in a castle where you've got nothing else to do, and this is your retirement package. You're certainly not, doing it for the gold. So, and I mean, well, I'm not going to ask anything else. Why do you do what you do?
Why do I do what I do? Maybe it's a tumor. No, it's not. It's the first wisecrack I've made all night. I can't imagine doing anything else. I'm originally from Chicago. I moved here in 1978. I would have stupidly registered a gun in 1978, but they wouldn't accept registrations. The scam in Chicago was you can own any gun you want, as long as it's registered. Okay, here's my registration. No, sorry, we don't accept those. That's what the McDonald case was about in Chicago, forcing them to accept registrations. And and the purists out there are going, no, 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 you don't want them to accept registrations. And ultimately we don't. But, it's an improvement if you can't have any guns, that you can now legally have some. That's an improvement. And eventually we can work on the laws in Illinois, just like we did in Arizona. So to go from having no concealed weapons to having a permit to then having constitutional carry. And eventually the constitutional carry movement may even move as far as Illinois, and I hope it does. Kentucky, for instance, is considering it. So I moved here to Arizona from Illinois as a political refugee for the right to keep and bear arms. And it's always been a problem for me that people, when they get power in government, think they can tell that that the hired help in any capital can tell their bosses what it is they can do with their freedom, provided they don't hurt other people or damage property. And it's never been, to me, the purview of any government to tell its citizens what it can and can't do, as long as it's not damaging other people or other people's property. And anything I can do to be of service to that cause, I will do. I'm not sure if that's an answer to why or not.
I leave it open intentionally. I think it's a great answer. Because again, it gives us some insight as to why the individuals that are out here do and have accomplished so much, why we're in the game, why you're in the game. Are you optimistic?
Yeah, I'm optimistic. We never lose unless we quit. I got to tell you that. There's no such thing as a loss, because there's no setback that can't be recovered from. And these people that say, well, as long as we got the Second Amendment, we can always shoot them. It's like, no, it's not about that. Yeah, I know ultimately that is in the background. It does have to hover like that forever. But that's not what you say to convince people to your side. The thing you say to convince people to your side is, if your daughter's away at college and someone's breaking down her door and it takes the police 9 minutes to get there, do you want them to find her body, or do you want her to have a gun and find the perpetrator's body? Which is it? Because it's either A or B. There's no C, D, E, or F. And if you make people think in that way, that's how you get your point across to people, not by saying, you can pry my gun from my cold, dead fingers. It's like, that'll be the pleasure of certain sheriffs and police departments to do. And just saying stuff like that on the internet and having stuff on your social media that they could just later use to get one of these stupid red flag bills later against you, it is not activism. It's just venting your spleen. And, if you look at the 7 deadly sins, you'll notice that wrath is one of them. Don't be wrathful. Be optimistic. Be excited. And, if we have a setback in the right to keep and bear arms, figure out a path around it. Look, I'm in sales. Our job is to get around objections. That's what we need to do in the right to keep and bear arms. We need to just keep selling the idea of freedom. And as long as we're better salespeople at the idea of freedom than the other side is at the idea of statism, we continue to have victories.
That's an excellent summary right there. I know I throw an open question, but Charles is up to it. Would you mind asking, where's your questions? Am I missing them? So that was an excellent answer to the why, and feel free to ask any other follow-ups to that.
You got all kinds of questions there. Must be some good ones.
Yeah, some of this is just chatting, though. So I'm looking for ones that are actually the questions from this guy.
Somebody send Pete a question right now, please.
But the next big one is going to be how you do what you're doing. I mean, I know, but we're just kind of
we're talking here on the.
But here's Austin from YouTube side says, Charles, what are your thoughts on the 2A and people who use medical marijuana in Arizona? Would the AzCDL fight for medical marijuana patients' 2A rights?
No.
Really?
No. The reason is simple. It's a federal issue, and we're involved at the state level. Now, some people go, "Oh, that's terrible. You're not for everybody." No. We work at the state level, and it's a federal law that you're fighting. It's the 68 Gun Control Act that made illegal drug users a category of prohibited possessor. And the thing is we're not the medical marijuana or the recreational marijuana lobby. That's other groups. We stick with the 2A. Okay, and I'll tell you now, if you got a medical marijuana card, federally, you're a prohibited possessor, and there's a question about that on the current 4473 form. So, if you're going to buy, don't get caught with it. If you're getting stopped by a federal agent, don't get caught with a marijuana card and a firearm, because it's It's a felony. All right.
Now the 4473 is like you say, it's instigated in 68 or started in 68, and it's been refined a little bit, but it's basically a piece of paper, federal form that you fill out when you're purchasing a firearm from a federally licensed dealer.
Right.
But it's different than a federal law that says you cannot own in certain circumstances.
No, it says it's not different. It says that if you're an illegal user of marijuana or other drugs, well, marijuana is illegal, and you say, well, I'm not an illegal user.
But I mean, it's saying though that's saying you can't purchase from a store, but is it saying someone who has a medical marijuana card
is a prohibited possessor? Yeah,
from owning a firearm.
Yeah, you're a prohibited possessor if you got a medical marijuana card. I'm not in favor of that. Okay, I think it's stupid, right? But I've never been, I've never been fond of marijuana. I won't say never did. I never used it, but I mean,
you're not an advocate.
No, I'm not an advocate, nor was I ever, like late in high school and early in college, was I ever even a user of it, and nor any other drug. And so, in fact, I detest intoxication in any form, and mostly for any reason except maybe if a person's in such severe pain from a terminal illness that they medicate themselves into unconsciousness. I get that. But other than that, I'm definitely not an advocate of any form of intoxication, recreational or other. And so if you want to use drugs, fine, but don't do it in such a way that you endanger your firearm rights. So in answer to the question, no, this AzCDL lobbies at the Arizona state level, and that's a federal law. And if people want to change the federal law, so if you have a medical marijuana card and a CCW, I'm good with that. In fact, I'd be in favor of that change to federal law.
Or just get rid of all those laws and let people do what they're going to do and not worry about it.
I'm fine with that too. I don't care. It doesn't bother me if somebody else wants to have marijuana. I think it's wasting your life. But if you want to waste your life, it's your life. You own it. I don't. And I don't have any authority to tell you what to do unless you're doing it on my property or you're threatening me or harming me or damaging my property.
So then Dano, again from Illinois, was asking.
By the way, did you see that that DGU defensive gun use in Chicago a couple of did you see that DGU in Chicago a couple of weeks ago where CCW permit, I'm on the radio, holder shot and killed his attacker? No. Really interesting. 41-year-old guy was driving in downtown Chicago on Wells Street, which is what's called Newtown. Wells and 1600 West and 800 North, Wells and Chicago are a little south of there. And somebody in a VW rear-ended him lightly. And when the BMW driver got out to check the damage, he went back he looked at the damage, went back to use the cell phone, probably to call the police. And as he did, the Volkswagen driver approached with a handgun, forced the BMW driver into his vehicle, and carjacked him. And he was going to steal the car, which point the BMW driver retrieved his handgun and shot his attacker in the head. And the attacker was taken to Stoger Hospital and pronounced dead. DRT, dead right there. And the police looked at it and said, well, he's got a CCW. He's got a Illinois firearm owner ID card. The gun's registered. It's legal. His carrying of it was legal. It appears, based on the car and the circumstance, that it was self-defense, and we're not going to arrest him. And they turned it over to the state's attorney in Illinois there, the Cook County attorney. And the Cook County attorney looked at the facts and said, this appears to be a justified shooting. We're not going to take it to the grand jury. And he got his gun back and, go on about his business. I imagine his BMW is pretty
messed up, but that's got to be
but I mean, that was virtually in downtown Chicago, and the Chicago cops go, oh, c'est la vie.
It used to be an indication of a change of law.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up there and I left there specifically because I couldn't legally carry a gun in Chicago. And now you can. And now, if I'm not in favor of shooting people. If there's a way of pointing a gun at somebody and saying, go away, and they go away, I think that's a better day than if you have to cap them. But if you have to, you have to. And at least the system is now not set up so that the good guy loses.
I guess
I hope I answered his question.
Dano's qualifying, I guess, his other question. Since the end of Jim Crow's days, in the current times, how do you see gun control as racism?
Well, gun control has been enforced far more against people of color than against white people. And so it's still a tool of racism to this very day. And the point, and it's also a tool against people who are less economically advantaged, because if you can afford a good attorney, you can get away with a hell of a lot more than you can if you're, destitute and working a minimum wage hourly job or slightly above that, or a low skills job. Whereas if you're, an accountant or a doctor and you get caught with a gun in Chicago, they're probably going to take you don't have a permit, they're probably going to take your gun away and say, you can't have this, sir, and let you go. I mean, unless you're stupid, drunk, abusive to the cop, whatever. Contempt of cop is a real crime in Chicago, even to this day. But it's still a tool of racism. And I wish it weren't. I'd like to see people be able to walk down the streets of Manhattan with an MP5 on a sling, with a can on the end of it and a go-go switch, full auto, and have
Not need to. You don't
no,
want
no,
to see
just
the battle.
no.
but
I just
you have
want
the
to see them
freedom
the freedom to do that. And somebody walks up to them and says, "Sir, can I ask you about that gun you have on?" And you say, "Sure. What would you like to know?" And they say, "Is that the new MP10 and 10 millimeter?"
Right.
And I would love to have it be so that people weren't so scared of guns in New York. Because just because we live in Arizona doesn't mean we can't appreciate the freedom of people in other jurisdictions.
I think that shows some insight to Charles's interest in science fiction, because there's no way that an H&K 9mm could handle a 10mm, but it's
Right.
a nice fantasy dream to have.
What? No, but no. I'm saying in the future
No, no,
when H&K makes, did they not make? I think they do make a version of it in 10mm. I don't know. I don't know. I think they do,
Oh,
but I could be wrong.
But
I don't claim to be the world's expert on guns. I really don't.
Now, so speaking of that, Dead Horse, a friend up in Utah, Salt Lake City area, is asking,
Why is a dead horse speaking?
Huh?
Why is a dead horse speaking to you? I'm just jealous because the voices are only speaking to you. Anyway,
saying, what is your preferred caliber and favorite gun?
I don't care. I don't have a favorite gun. I don't give a rat's round end what gun. I want the gun that's on me. Okay, that's my favorite gun of the day. I really don't have a favorite gun. I mean, there are some guns I get my eyes mist over when I see them with beautiful engraving and stuff like that. There's some guns I wish I hadn't gotten rid of. If you want to know my favorite, if the gun I enjoy the most, it's my M1. It's my Garand. I have a Garand that's been converted lovingly to take the M1A box magazine and rebarreled from 30-06 to 308. And it's my favorite gun just because it's so it's not favorite. It's the gun I get the most joy. The word in Hebrew is nachas, the pleasure out of. But I don't shoot it. I haven't been to the range with it in years. I like 40 caliber. I like one of my carry pieces is I have a Glock 27 frame with a Glock 23 top on it. So I have a shorter handle and a longer barrel. I've noticed there's some companies making customs that are Glock 26 size frames with Glock 22 size slides on them. So it's a very long slide with a very short handle. Makes it much easier to conceal, especially if that gun has got a holster that allows you to put it in your belt line. So the barrel is along the vertical line of your body down your pants leg, and it disappears, and there's only a stub of a handle sticking out. You put a Pierce grip adapter, a magazine in it, so you got a full 4 fingers on the gun. That in 9mm would be incredibly manageable, and in 40 would still be pretty manageable. I don't have one, but I do have one with I put my 23 slide on my 27. I would love, if anybody's got to sell me, I would love to buy a Glock 23 slide only. I don't need the barrel. I've got a barrel. I'm just looking for a Glock 23 slide with the sights on it. And if anybody wants, you can reach me, Charles at libertywatchradio.com. Again, Charles at libertywatchradio.com. I'll buy it from you. It's not the registered part of it's not the it's a slide you can send somebody in the mail. It's not a receiver, so you don't have to
we all know that. You don't have to tell our audience.
Well, I know that, but it's just anybody listening anywhere. And I'm not selling guns. I'm not buying guns. I'm just looking for a part. Anyway, go ahead.
Now,
ask me more.
Are you like Mossad Ayub, where you want to carry a revolver today? Big deal. I'll carry a revolver today, or I got a whim to carry 1911. Seems like you carry a Glock more often than not.
I've been with Ruger LCS and a Ruger LCP because of trying to have a lower profile in my carry. But if my preferred gun when I go for my nightly walk is the 27 frame with the 23 top and one offside magazine. Actually, I just recently put a rig together where I can't really get that on my belt, but I take my full frame Glock 22 and put it in a holster that already lives on my bug out bag and an offside double mag pouch. That's enough. It's got what 15 or 16 in the gun and two 15-round mags. If there's more problem than that, I should have brought a rifle.
Yeah, and we live in the desert, so you never know when pack of critters going to come off.
Yeah, yeah.
I got a quick question from Pancakes. He's in Pennsylvania. Maybe a dumb question, but is Charles the person behind the Heller decision? And what is the quick rundown on that decision? Like, that's a whole other show, but that's a whole other guy.
Yeah,
same name.
Yeah, Dick Heller has been a guest of mine on the radio, and I'm not Dick Heller. No, I'm not related to him. We share the same last name, but we're not related. And the rundown on the decision is that Dick Heller worked as a special police officer, which means a police officer on duty, but he's not off duty. And he worked for the federal government, still does, I believe. And he's a guard there during the day. He carried a 40 caliber Glock at work, but couldn't own one legally in his home. And that's what he wanted to do, and that's what the Heller decision was. It was a very narrowly framed decision that said that the right to keep and bear arms is an individual right, not based on militia service, and that common ordinary guns that are in ordinary use are very much covered, and that the handgun that he wanted to own very much was covered by the Heller decision.
So it basically established the right to keep. All we want, just the bear part.
Right, to keep in your home. And then the right to bear arms was brought forth by the, keeping your, and what happened was the Heller decision really only affected federal enclaves. It was a very narrowly crafted decision. In 2010, the McDonald decision incorporated Heller upon the states. That's called the doctrine of selective incorporation, practiced by the Supreme Court for many years. Some diehard constitutionalists are against it. I am not against it. I think it's a great idea. Forcing the states to obey the Constitution is wonderful. And the McDonald decision forced the states to obey Heller. And there have been other decisions like the one Roe versus Madigan, which came from the Seventh Circuit, or Seventh Circus, as some of us call it, to enforce it upon the state of Illinois. And that's how they got their concealed weapons permit law, although that needs massive reform. And I think Illinois is eventually going to be forced into reciprocity. Right now, they only have reciprocity with 5 states.
I mean, am I wrong? It's unrealistic to expect them to go from 0 to constitutional carry.
Oh,
so
right.
These are the steps.
They almost had constitutional carry. If the legislature hadn't have acted, they would have ended up in a de facto constitutional carry situation, which I would have loved. Just loved for Illinois.
That would have been great.
But
especially if they got blindsided by it.
Oh, well, they weren't blindsided by it. Well, what happened during the legislature is that in the legislature, the Democrats and the Republicans sat down to legislate whether or not they're going to do a concealed carry bill, and the Dems folded their arms and say, we aren't budgeting. And the Republicans said, great.
Good. Yeah.
At which point they suddenly realized what would have happened, and they kind of came up with this in a hurry, the 16-hour plan and the no reciprocity and the restrictive and law enforcement right to veto and all kinds of other things that are just garbage in the Illinois bill. But, it is what it is, and I think it'll improve. Other questions?
Let's see. This is kind of an off topic, but if with all the polymer 45s and their higher capacity, is there still a place for the 1911 in modern day concealed carry?
That's up to the person. I'm not here to tell somebody what to carry. I gave up on 1911s about 22 years ago. I don't miss them. The only time I miss my 1911, I had a para-ordnance P13 and a P12 and a P14. I had the small, medium, and large. And the only thing I miss is the way the 1911 feels in my hand, because that was the second handgun I ever held in my life was my dad's 1911, which was issued in 1914. And that was the first handgun I really ever fired, was that gun at a range, at Bell's Range, for my 11th birthday in 1967. And that gun made music so beautiful, I've never lost the tune. But I'll tell you that I'm not, although I nostalgically love the feel of the 1911, I don't carry them anymore, and I don't like them for self-defense in terms of the style of the gun, unless you are very professional about your level of practice and you're very, very careful, because I don't like having to take a safety off and put it on during defensive gunfire.
The manipulation of a 1910 design of a
right
designed for conscripts in a draft army, where you have a safety that needs to be disengaged as you draw. It's a lot of manipulation.
Well, you shouldn't disengage it as you draw. You should only disengage it when you're going to fire.
Well, okay, so I guess that's
the problem.
That's a
and then you should re-engage it the
instruction.
instant you're done firing, and then disengage it again if you have to fire again. So, I mean, and this is a level of skill. I'm not saying people are stupid and they can't do it. You can teach somebody to do anything. You know, I mean, you can teach your dog to roll over too, and the dog's not anywhere near as intelligent as we are. But when you're scared, it's hard to remember your training.
Like, give yourself extra
right. And so I'm in favor of guns that don't have an external safety other than, say, on the trigger like the Glock does, that don't have some mechanism, excuse me, that requires you to manipulate it before you
at a time when you've got the most stress you're ever going to encounter with the most consequences.
Right. I want something that's, basically a point and click interface. And
that's the thing, we have them.
Right. So. And a revolver is fine if that's what you want to carry. I don't, but if a revolver is what you've got and what you're good with and what you train with, and you know how to reload it in a hurry, then great.
So I think we've chatted before, so I appreciate you taking the time to take another hour for this project I'm working on, because I did want to include people in radio and people with the kind of experience and Rolodex on how it's knowledge of stuff. I'm sure we'll chat with you again, and I want to thank the people that are watching this live. I'm going to wrap it up with letting Charles end it here with where to get in contact with him, where to follow the stuff that he's doing. But I want to take a minute to say thanks to the people that have been watching us live. Everything we do is an effort in this new media. We don't listen to the radio. We don't watch television. We're using the internet, and the people that ask questions, the people that use the shares and the likes and the using the internet and creating those reciprocal links. We appreciate that. The people that are part of the conversation now, or if you're listening to this in the future and asking questions, that's what it's all about. And thanks to the people that make it possible, the people over on Patreon that basically buy me a cup of coffee each month. If enough people buy a couple people a cup of coffee, imagine what we'll be able to do without our hands tied. So with that, Charles, how can they get a hold of you?
Well, first I'd like to say that Pete's dog probably needs a cup of coffee too. But anyway, first of all, I would encourage anyone who's listening to me to write this down, to actually take out an old-fashioned pen and write this. And this is my Parker jotter. There's a story behind it. We don't have time. And that is to write down my email address. If you want to be in touch with me, great. I'm happy to answer email. I try, and I got a lot of irons in the fire, but I try to be as responsive as I can. As the communications coordinator for both the Arizona Citizens Defense League and for JPFO to this very day, I would be happy to communicate with you to the extent I can. Number one, my email address is charles@libertywatchradio.com. Again, charles@libertywatchradio.com. That's number one. Second of all, if you're going to be anywhere near Phoenix, and even if you're not, consider going to the Gun Rights Policy Conference. This year, you can Google it and find the dates.
Oh, it's September 20th, 21st, and 22nd.
In Phoenix at the Sheraton.
I don't know that. I know
it's at the that hotel that used to belong to Fife Symington. I can't think of the name.
Is that the same one as
Crescent Hotel? Yeah,
Crescent. It's on 19. Whatever that hotel is on 19. Right by Shooters.
No, it's on 19th Street. No, it's on Dunlap at on I-10.
Oh, so it's not the same one as it was in 2010. In 2010, it was on 19 going out of town. Remember?
That's not 19. That's 17.
17. Is it that same one?
Yeah.
Okay, well, it's by Shooters
17.
World. 17. I'm used to 19 down here.
Right,
okay,
yeah. It's on Interstate 17 at
Dunlap.
I did live in Phoenix for a while. And then go to Gun Rights Policy Conference. Come up to me, at a break at the. Don't come up during the conference because I do the recording for it. You can catch the recording on my website, libertywatchradio.com. click on the GRPC tab, and a day or two after Gun Rights Policy Conference, the entire conference will be there. You can click on it. Right now, that page is empty because there's no files on it. I erased last year's. About 6. Yeah, that's what I said. There's the audio. Yeah, you want to do that because it's going to talk over us. There you go.
There we go.
All right. So I encourage you to go on libertywatchradio.com. If you want to listen to my programs, I've had some fascinating guests. I do a lot of preparation. If there's a guest who has a book, I actually read the whole book from cover to cover, and I do a probative interview for an hour, sometimes 90 minutes, every now and then 2 hours with any one guest. But you can find those on libertywatchradio.com/recent_shows. It's about the 5th button down on my website. On libertywatchradio.com, you can go on.
I did it again.
Yeah, you did it again. You should
just go back to
cancel out of
recent
that
shows.
website.
There we go.
Yeah, on recent shows, and you can find it on the recent shows tab. There's also an older archive where I've interviewed a lot of really fascinating people, and it's called, surprisingly enough, Older Archive. And you can find the interview I did with Colonel Lee Archer, who was a Tuskegee Airman, with the two of the 13 men who captured the German U-505 submarine on June the 2nd of 1944, Wayne Pickles and Zenon Lukosius. Pickles is the guy that got the Enigma machine. And so it's just fascinating stuff on there. I interviewed Benjamin Franklin. Don't ask me how. I've interviewed Thomas Jefferson, Ollie North, bunch of Dennis Weaver, bunch of interesting people.
My favorite is Marcinko.
Oh, Dick Marcinko, yeah. I've interviewed him. I interviewed Admiral Giambastiani. Admiral G, was a very good interview. I've had
this one was awesome.
Which my favorite is Pardo's push.
Yeah,
Bob Pardo,
cool.
who pushed another aviator, put his windshield in the guy's tail hook and pushed him 88 miles out of North Vietnam, where he would have surely been beaten to death as he ejected into the crowd. He just bombed next at a power plant in North Vietnam over Hanoi. Anyway, just a fascinating story. There's a lot of really, really good, inspiring stuff in the interviews that I've got on the website. If anybody ever finds a broken link, email me, charles@libertywatchradio.com, or you can scroll through the recent shows file, although only the last 6 months are active files. If you find a show from 10 years ago that you want to listen to, send me an email. I'll freshen it up into the archive and stick it on the bottom of the files on the active file, and you can download it and get it. I've had some really, really, really good ones. The one I did with Frank Sesno of CNN, he wrote a book called Ask More, and Frank is a man of the left, and I made a concerted effort not to get into arguments with him, just to strictly stick to the topic. And he tried real hard not to be on the interview, and then he tried to back out. I wanted to have him on for 90 minutes. He wanted to do 30. He finally agreed to 60. I kept him for 70 minutes, and that was the hardest interview I've ever done. And also, it was one of the most mentally taxing interviews I've ever done. But it's one of my favorites of all the ones I've had on. But I've had so many good ones. Just last week, I had two excellent guests. One no-show, and I did a show off the cuff. And anyway, if you want to listen, libertywatchradio.com. Click on the recent shows tab. My swap shop show is pretty fun, but it's just local stuff. People buying, selling, and trading. But I wisecrack and play sound effects a lot. And if you like entertaining shows, that's good. And then if you want to start an organization like the Citizens Defense League, we can help you with that. If you want questions on the financial end, we'll have our treasurer get with you. On the lobbying end, we'll have our president get with you. On the publicity end, I'll get with you. I mean, we'll send you our bylaws if you want them to start a similar organization. So whatever you want to do, we're here to help. We're here to promote freedom, and we're not grandstanders. We don't aggrandize ourselves. What we aggrandize is freedom. So
love it. Thanks for the.
I think that's a good closing.
Yeah.
Remark.
So thanks for the time again, and for all you do. And we're going to end this with. I have no idea. We recorded it in this room. I think maybe
6 years ago.
Six. I was going to say.
But before you hit the button, I want you to send me the URL for this, because I want to publish it to the Citizens Defense League people.
Right on.
Excuse me, and we'll that way I'll at least I'll have proof of life that I was actually on your show.
And that's sort of what we're doing this too, so that you
Right.
get an hour's worth of interview to share around. So thanks everybody for participating, and we'll see you tomorrow with Mac from Military Arms Channel, and then Thursday with Jared from Guns and Gadgets out of Pennsylvania.
Oh, send me their contact info. I'd like to interview them on the radio.
Oh, you bet. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And now
You're a
we'll
good
end,
lead source.
now we'll end it with Charles from 6 years ago, and I end most of my shows with that.
The guys and gals of gunwebsites.com encourage you to take a CCW class every year, practice at least once a month, and carry every day. Thanks for watching gunwebsites.com.